Secretary General and the Ukraine Defence Minister, and we're expecting to hear, indeed, from the UK Defence Secretary and probably the US Defence Secretary a little later on today as well. Let's talk about business, though, because we're going to start with the UK economy. It grew fractionally in the final 3 months of 2024, with better than expected growth recorded in December, in a modest boost for the Chancellor. Official figures from the Office for National Statistics showed that gross domestic product edged up by 0.1% in the fourth quarter, driven largely by services and manufacturing. Now, many economists have been expecting a contraction for the period, with zero growth reported in the previous quarter. So essentially, we have managed to avoid a recession. Let's bring in Paul Kelso, our business and economics correspondent. Paul, it is good news, but let's be frank about this. Only just.
Yes, it is only just. It's a sliver of growth in the quarter, slightly more than that, 0.4% in December. But so often we talk about not just journalistically, but the markets more importantly and politically, look at how these things perform against expectations. And there's pretty widespread expectations. This morning we'd have been talking about the economy contracting in the last quarter of last year. Add that to a flat quarter in the third quarter, and you look at an economy that was smaller since Labour won the election. So from that point of view, it is positive. The government this morning, we've heard from the Chancellor, but the government this morning is trying to get on the front foot about what it intends to do about this tepid rate of growth. I've been listening to a speech by Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary at Samsung's headquarters, some offices in London they have. He's been talking about regulation, easing regulation. You'll recall that the Competition and Markets Authority had its head lopped off by the Chancellor and Jonathan Reynolds not so long ago, because they felt that the CMA was slowing down the kind of deals that would be good for growth, unnecessarily cautious. They're looking for a new boss. Sounds like the current acting head has got a good chance of getting that job. Mr. Reynolds told me he's setting out a consultation today about how the CMA should improve, asking business what it wants from a regulator. And it's interesting, this is one of those measures, it sounds very dry, but it's one that businesses do raise when you talk to them unbidden. They say they'd like this because a more Competition and Markets Authority that's more open to letting deals get done rather than standing in the way means there might be more activity, more mergers and acquisitions, more consolidation of companies that will lead to more jobs ultimately in the end. Another interesting thing Mr. Reynolds said on that, he talking to journalists afterwards, he posed the question, are there too many regulators? They operate across sectors in the UK. Some of them do what's a very important job in monopoly industries like water, in defending customers' interests. But I got the indication is that perhaps if you look at financial services, there are several regulators, some of whose responsibilities overlap. Now, Mr. Reynolds drew the difference between, in financial services, what's possible in the US since the financial crash in 2008 and what's possible here. That's a signal to me that he believes that regulation is overweening. It needs to be loosened. Now, people will be caught. They'll remember what happened in 2008, the huge public intervention that was required to prop up the economy. The British economy, in many ways, hasn't yet recovered to its scale before that. That clear push this morning from Jonathan Reynolds, a clear indication that regulation is in his sights. He said the government is serious about scaling back regulation to make it easier to do business.
OK, interesting stuff. Paul, as always, thank you very much indeed. Paul Kelso there for us in Westminster. Let's speak to Louise Hellam, who is Chief Economist at the Confederation of British Industry, this morning. Louise, let's begin with your reaction to that news. Tepid growth, but growth at the very least.
That's right. Yeah, I think we thought that the rebound in activity this morning was encouraging, and it confirms our view that that loss of momentum that we have been seeing in the economy is hopefully a soft patch. For 2024 as a whole, we saw 0.9% growth, which was bang in line with our forecast, and we're expecting growth of 1.6% this year. So we should see some strengthening going forwards. But obviously there are some risks around that, particularly if we do continue to see weakness in consumer sentiment. We really do need to start to see consumers going out there and spending. Now they have got wages, which are much stronger than inflation at the moment. And we need to make sure that there aren't any further squeezes on businesses as well, which do run the risk of reducing investment, which is what we need to see to make sure we have sustained growth in the UK economy.
But Louise, you know, when you actually step back, you think the UK population has increased quite a lot in the last year or so. So real GDP is actually down. When you take this per heads of the British population, it's fallen by 0.1%.
Yeah, that's right. I think if you kind of zoom out and look at that big picture, you know, this is a continuation of the story where growth in the UK and particularly productivity is not where we want it to be. And that's one of the reasons why we're really supportive and have indeed been pushing for the government to adopt its growth mission, because ultimately that is what we need to see: higher, more sustained growth to make sure we do improve living standards in the UK. So I think some of the more recent measures by government, particularly the speech from the Chancellor the other week, and I know you've just been talking about Jonathan Reynolds' speech this morning, that laser focus on growth is really important. But we need to make sure that we're continuing to see action in that space. The industrial strategy and work on the spending review this year will be really important to make sure we've both got the full weight of government and government spending pushing for growth. But really importantly, we need to see government and business working together to really co-create those reforms. So particularly when you talk about regulation, we do need to make sure that that is streamlined, that that is really outcomes focused. And so it makes sure it's not being an impediment to innovation within the UK economy.
I suppose, Louise, I'm going to do this again just to emphasise that we're still in a pretty bad place. We had 0.4% growth in 2023, 0.9% last year. You've got different growth figures from what the Bank of England have, who've just halved the growth forecast for this coming year down to 0.75%. I mean, we're growing, but my word, only just. I mean, you know, certainly 20 years ago, these figures would have been seen as derisory, as terrible.
That's right. I mean, if you're looking at some of the averages, particularly pre-financial crisis, the UK economy was growing closer to 3%. And the period just before COVID, we were looking at closer to 2%. So yes, these are definitely not the figures that we want to see. And that is why we are really pushing to make sure that we do have that focus on growth, how we make sure that we are improving innovation, we're pulling back some of those barriers to investment, whether that is on regulation, on planning. Skills is also one of the big areas for the UK economy where we need to see more flexibility given to employers, for example, around how they can spend the apprenticeship levy. And we also, again, need to think about that high tax burden for business at the moment. So the government is looking at business rates reform, and we need to really make sure that that will really reduce that business for all sectors across the economy.
OK, Louise, really good stuff. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Thank you, Louise Hellam there. Well, one of the drivers that helped grow the economy was manufacturing. Let's get more on that from Mike Cherry. Now, he's a former national chair of the Federation of Small Businesses, but he also runs his own business, a family business. It's a timber merchants established in Burton-upon-Trent back in 1897. So it's got incredible history. I suppose my first question, Mike, is we are talking about a growing economy, only just. On the ground level, is that what you're seeing?
No, I don't think it is. And I think, quite frankly, when we hear talk about regulation, when we hear talk about growth, that's not what people are actually seeing on the ground, particularly in smaller businesses. When you look at the budget announcement and you look at the upfront costs that are going in completely the wrong direction, be that national insurance, with the increase to 15% for employers, with the almost halving of the threshold at which it starts to be paid by employers, that's all going in the wrong direction. When you look at the relief now being cut for high streets on the business rates relief, that's been cut down to 40%. And again, it's another serious upfront cost that government after government has promised reform on, but we aren't seeing any movement at all on that.
So, are you saying?
And you've also got the employment legislation through, which is going to really impact small businesses far more than larger businesses.
Interestingly, you're saying successive governments. You're not necessarily blaming one political party or another, but your argument is what's at fault here is the government, that the British economy is not growing because of the government. Is that fair?
I think it is fair because for a very, very long time, we've been saying, look to the small business community. They are the engine for growth, quite frankly. There could be a lot more that government could do with smaller businesses to get that growth going. But everything that we're seeing in the budget and in announcements, not on the ground, is going contra to what the government is asking for on growth for the economy. And whilst the 0.1% over the last quarter is very, very welcome news indeed, it may continue on that way, but we're not seeing that on the ground. And I think this is the problem. You're not going to see it in the short term. There's real concerns about the longer term. And coming back to family businesses, whether it be farms, whether it be business itself, with the introduction of the inheritance tax, that is going to be a real problem for businesses to absorb. They're going to have to change all their plans that they have put in place. And it's going to act as a disincentive for investment, for growth, and for aspiration.
OK, Mike, thank you very much indeed. That Mike Cherry there. Just to let you know that this is a live press conference that's taking place in Munich, in Germany. Police dealing with a major incident in that city after multiple people were injured as a driver rammed what we think is a car into a crowd in the German city. We know that around 20 people have been injured in that. At least 2 people, we believe, seriously. As I say, the major police operation underway. The driver, we're told, has been secured. There have also been reports of shots heard before the driver was held. But we do know that at least several people have been injured in this incident. It is in German. They are clarifying the details. But as I say, we believe that at least 20 people have been injured in this incident in Munich with a driver ramming into the group. So we believe that the car was approached by police cars, it seems, at the scene, but then decided to speed up. And we are being told by the Reuters news agency, this is from the police, as I say, with that press conference underway in Munich, that the driver was a 24-year-old Afghan national. That is what Reuters are saying from that press conference, that the driver was a 24-year-old Afghan national. And as I say, we believe that maybe up to or around 20 people were injured in that, some of them seriously. It should be said, of course, there is an election in Germany in just over a week's time, February 23rd. We will have that election. The Bavarian Premier is saying that it was a suspected attack, so they are saying that this was a deliberate incident. As you can see, the German police are saying that they can't approach people at the scene. The current Bavarian Premier, they're thanking the police officers who attended that scene, with the police saying that, and the Bavarian Premier saying that the sympathy of the authorities there in Bavaria is with the people of Munich. So we have confirmation there of what is now being branded an attack in Munich. The police saying that there is a 24-year-old Afghan national who is the driver of that car, and that some people have been seriously injured and at least 20 people injured in that incident. We'll have continuing coverage, of course, throughout the day here on Sky News of that incident in Munich. Let's return to the business news now and bring you up to date with the rest of the news. And 100 possible locations are being considered for new towns in England. The Prime Minister is promising the biggest house building programme since the post-war era, saying he wants to deliver 1.5 million new homes by the next election. Japanese car makers Honda, Nissan and Mitsubishi said they've ended talks to integrate their businesses. The three had been holding discussions about setting up a joint holding company and exploring ways to collaborate. Analysts had been puzzled by what advantages the deal could bring because the companies exist when it comes to models. And the rise in the cost of government borrowing last month seems to have slowed the property market slightly. The Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors says that demands and sales for houses were broadly flat compared to December. It suggests the recent spike in gilt yields could be to blame. And as always, you can get more on the latest money and business news on our Money blog. All you need to do is scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. That'll take you to the Sky News app or the website for all the very latest. OK, let's get a look at the markets on this Thursday morning. Let's speak to Lizzie Gilbraith, political economist and asset manager, Aberdeen. Very good morning to you, Lizzie. We have to talk, don't we, about these GDP figures. Pretty good when it comes to the government. Rachel Reeves saying she's not very happy with the growth forecasts. But it could have been a lot worse, couldn't she? But there are going to be lots of obstacles ahead for the Chancellor, not least of all the public finances.
Yeah, I mean, of course, a small positive number is better than a small negative number, but it doesn't really change the short-term economic outlook that Rachel Reeves is facing. And I think the big challenge is that from the perspective of the OBR, this GDP figure is not going to really change their fundamental position and the likelihood that they are going to be looking at a quite significant downgrade of their GDP forecast over 2025 come March. And that then puts Rachel Reeves in quite a difficult spot because it may well be that she is then in breach of the UK fiscal rules, given that she left herself with quite narrow headroom, only 9.9 billion against that day-to-day spending rule. So that could be a point of real crunch come March.
OK, Lizzie, apologies for this. We're just going to leave that there because we're going to return back to what's happening in Munich this morning. It seems actually that press conference is continuing. We were listening in to the police chiefs, to the Bavarian Premier, and as you can see at the bottom of your screen there, he has said that the incident is a suspected attack, that this was a deliberate attack. And we know that the Munich police have said the driver was a 24-year-old Afghan national. We've also heard, we were talking about the figures, weren't we, a little earlier on. It seems that press conference is now finished. We thought it was around 20 people. They are now saying that 27 people have been injured, some seriously and some critically. So the Bavarian Interior Minister is saying that 27 people have been injured, some seriously and some critically. We're also hearing that the suspect was known to police. Now, this was in relation to drug and theft incidents, so not necessarily connected to any form of terrorism or the fact that this attack may well happen, but the suspect was known to police. But as I say, 27 people injured in that. It is also been noted, and I talked about the election, didn't I, a little earlier. There is an election in Germany in just over a week's time, but there is also a security conference in Munich. So the Bavarian Premier is saying that they do not think this is connected with that security conference. But the Bavarian Premier is saying that something has to change in Germany, and this is evidence of this. We know there have been attacks, of course, indeed using vehicles in Germany over the last couple of years. This is just the latest one. We do now know from what we've heard from the police, from the Premier of Bavaria, of course the German region in which Munich is based, that this was a suspected attack, i.e. it was deliberate, and that a 24-year-old Afghan national was the driver. The police spokesperson saying that the car approached police vehicles at the scene before speeding up and hitting people. So that 24-year-old Afghan national has been secured, is the term the police are using. I think it's fair to say that he's been arrested, detained, if you like. But, as I say, they are talking about the number of people who've been injured, 27, some seriously, and some have been critically hurt. So it does seem, from what the police are saying and what the authorities are saying, that this was a deliberate attack. The police saying the car appears to have sped up and hit people at a union demonstration that was taking place. And that obviously, as we can see there from the pictures on your screen, that those people who've been injured, some critically, some seriously, have been taken to hospital. This incident happening this morning. You can see there a large police and medical presence at the scene as they deal with what they're now saying is a suspected attack, and that involved was a 24-year-old Afghan national. We can speak to Siobhan Robbins, our Europe correspondent, who is in Germany for us this morning. And we're getting a little bit more detail here, aren't we, Siobhan? But the headline is clear that they view this very much as a deliberate incident.
Yes, and this will be the news that many in Germany did not want to hear, coming just over a week ahead of a general election which is focusing already on divisions in the community and a big push by the far right to crack down on migration. So the fact that police have now confirmed that the suspect who was driving that car was a 24-year-old Afghan is only really going to add fuel to the flames that are already dividing this country. I just want to run through some of those headlines that we heard from a news conference that was held by the police and the Bavarian Premier. So the police said that the car appeared to speed up after it saw police lines as it approached the Verdi Union demonstration. We understand that the driver of the car was an Afghan man in his 20s and that police have detained him at the scene. Now, the Bavarian Premier has said that this is a suspected attack. And he also added that something has to change in Germany. This is evidence of that. And just to give people a bit of a background about what's been happening in Germany, over the last year, there have been several attacks which have been carried out where the suspect is a migrant or a refugee. And the most recent one, which is being investigated, is one that happened just before Christmas in the city of Magdeburg, where a Saudi doctor has been accused of driving his car deliberately into a crowd of people who were at a Christmas market there, killing 5 and injuring hundreds more. Now, because of these attacks, the focus in this election that we're heading into has really firmly been placed on migration. There was another attack in southern Germany a few weeks ago where 2 people were killed. And the far-right AfD party has used these as evidence that there needs to be much stricter controls, they say, on migration. They want permanent checks on the borders, for example. And the CDU, which is the party of the former Chancellor Angela Merkel, they've also said they want much tougher rules on migration as well, saying they want permanent checks on the border, also the possibility of even turning some asylum seekers away at the border, which their critics say would actually infringe EU law. But you can see that this is really already causing big divisions in Germany. Tens of thousands of people last week in Munich itself actually protested against what they see as the rise of the far right. And so those people will be very concerned, and many people, I think, in Germany will be very concerned that the confirmation, which appears to be coming from the Bavarian Premier, that this is being looked at as a suspected attack by a person of foreign origin, will really underline and really just cause those divisions in Germany to widen.
And Siobhan, you talked about the political situation and the election that's taking place and the rise of the AfD, but also in Munich this weekend, we're expecting a big security conference. It's an annual event. It happens every year. There are lots of high-profile people who attend these conferences, government ministers from all over the world, sometimes heads of states. But the Bavarian Interior Minister is saying that they do not suspect there is a connection to that security conference.
Yes, that's right. So the security conference, which officially starts tomorrow, will be taking place around 1.5 kilometres, so a mile from where this car hit this crowd of people. And as you say, this is a place where we see high-profile politicians and delegations coming from around the world to talk about issues of security. So, for example, this year we'll see President Zelensky there. We will see the US Vice President as well. And topics potentially on the agenda include plans for a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. So already in Munich, there will have been heightened security because of the number of high-profile people who are coming to the city, and many of them may already be there because it is starting tomorrow, as I said. However, as you say, the Bavarian Premier saying they don't believe that this car crash was connected to the security conference that's happening. They haven't really enlightened us as to what they believe the possible motivation may be, but they allege that the driver had carried out what they are calling a suspected attack.
OK, Siobhan, a country undoubtedly that will be on high alert again, as you say, following a number of incidents in recent years that will undoubtedly feed into the politics there in Germany as well. Siobhan Robbins, live for us this morning. Thank you very much indeed. And just to reiterate what we've heard there is that 27 people have been injured, some seriously and some critically, after what has now been branded as a suspected attack in Bavaria, in Munich, in Germany. The region's interior minister added that the suspect was known to police in relation to drug and theft incidents. It is not connected to that security conference, but that the suspect is a 24-year-old Afghan national, and that he was the driver of that car that approached police vehicles at the scene before speeding up and hitting people at a union demonstration. So that is the very latest from Bavaria. That is it from me for the moment. I will be back, of course, with Business Live at 4:30 this afternoon. Do join me then if you can. Stay tuned, though, for continuing coverage of this attack in Germany.